The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
A man interrogated and released in Arizona as part of the desperate investigation for Today Show host mother Nancy Guthrie. And in Georgia, a jury is seated in the trial for a parent of an accused school shooter. Should the father's trial go before the son's? And in South Carolina, a sheriff caught on camera gunning down a judge in Chambers, vying to get death off the table. Are the arguments credible? Let's talk about it. In the court of law, it's all about the law and the facts. Let's turn the page and call to order Court of Opinion. Welcome to Court of Opinion. I'm Julia Janae. Thank you for joining us this evening. The search for Savannah Guthrie's missing mother, Nancy, tragically continues for an 11th day, if you can believe it. The 84-year-old was last seen Saturday night and was reported missing on Sunday. This is from last week after not showing up for church. Now, major developments were made in the last 48 hours, including yesterday, law enforcement officials releasing this surveillance video of a potential subject in the investigation. Now, police also questioned a person of interest overnight. He was later released. The man who says he was the person detained spoke to our Scripps News Group station KNXV in Phoenix. Take a listen.
How did this all start? How did they stop you here? You were driving here?
No,
or
my wife was driving.
Your wife was driving?
Because they were following me. And once I saw they were following me, I pulled over. They didn't even have to put a traffic stop or anything. I got off the car, and they arrested me as soon as I got out the car. They didn't even tell me what was going on until the detectives got here, like 2 hours before I got arrested. And then the detectives got here. It was the FBI agent in Santa Cruz County. And they told me I was being detained for kidnapping. And I asked them, like, well, kidnapping of who? And they told me this lady, I don't know her name. And
Nancy Guthrie?
Yeah, that's her. And I told him I work in Tucson for GLS. I might have delivered a package to your house, but I never kidnapped anybody. They hold me from like 4 to right now.
So it was about 4 o'clock, and they're holding you to right now. So after midnight. Did they tell you anything? I mean, you're in the back of the truck.
They didn't tell me anything until right now. Like I said, like the beginning, they answered they wanted me to answer their questions, like where I was, what hours, and all that. And I answered the questions. And right now, all they told me is that I'm free to go.
Had you heard of Nancy Guthrie before tonight?
Never until today.
Never until today.
Yeah.
So
I didn't. They told me I watched the news and I Googled her number or her name, and I prove it to me. And they couldn't prove it to me. Like they didn't have no. It was insufficient evidence. Like they only had a phone on me. That's all they had. And supposedly I was at her house, but like I said, I work delivering packages to GLS. I might have delivered a package to her house.
But didn't kidnap anybody?
No.
So what's going through your head when they're telling you kidnapped somebody?
Bro, I'm facing life. I'm gonna lose everything.
And so they have all this. They detain you. You're here for hours. And what did they just tell you?
That I'm free to go.
Free to go. You hadn't followed this news. This is big, major news. It's Nancy Guthrie, who's her daughter is Savannah Guthrie, who hosts the Today Show on NBC. So it's been big news. She's been missing for more than a week. So they had put out, the Pima County Sheriff's Department put out that they had detained a person of interest. And I guess that's you?
I guess so. I'm innocent. I'll let you know that.
That's
I'll tell you that. I didn't do anything. Like I said, I didn't even know what was going on until the FBI and the Pima County detective arrived, and they told me, well, you're being detained for kidnapping, and all of a sudden they read me my Miranda rights. Now you're being under arrest. I'm like, what the fuck is going on?
And now free to go.
Yeah, now I'm free to go.
What a surprising development in all of this. Not so much that they had someone and released them, but that we get to hear from that person. And what does it all mean for this investigation? Let's get the thoughts and opinions from our power panel. We have with us criminal defense attorney Darnell Crossland and criminal defense attorney and former head New Jersey County prosecutor Bob Bianchi. We've got defense and prosecution, I feel like, going head to head today. It's good to have you both on. Let's talk about this man, first of all. Of course, we're going to talk about the search for Nancy and where the FBI and the Pima County officials are. But Bob, he spoke out immediately after this, which most attorneys would say, don't give any statements to the media if you have been investigated for a crime. But do you think this was actually the right move given the national attention and outrage over this case?
It doesn't sound like the gentleman had a lot of time to reach out to an attorney. They swooped him off the street. They basically questioned him, interrogated him. I would have really loved to have known, like there are certain false negatives that they're going to give a person that they're interviewing like this, and maybe some shards of information based on the manner of the questions they asked him would have given us in the media a little bit more insight into what's going on in the investigation. But listen, I don't know, obviously, what's going on here. And as I said to you last week, I'm very careful having done these investigations because there's a lot of misinformation out there. They may have cleared him. They may not have cleared him. If his phone was at that location, then I'm going to assume he's still a person of interest. I mean, I'm not saying this gentleman did anything wrong, but the fact that you're released means something, but it doesn't also mean everything here. So they're running leads down, and that's what's going on. Information management in a situation like this is the biggest, most daunting problem. You have multiple agencies that have to communicate with one another. You probably have thousands of tips that are coming in, and you have to make sure that Team A knows what Team S is doing and that that information gets coordinated. That's where I've seen these investigations go awry, where one person had a piece of information that seemed benign and another one had a piece of information that seemed benign, but when you put it together, it solved the case. So there's a lot going on here, but sometimes those assets in multiple jurisdictions can actually be harmful. But hopefully they'll work together.
You talk about those two teams, and it seems like in the middle is Team M, the media, and we don't know what information we're getting, whether it's the full information or it's limited. Darnell, what's your opinion of the falsely accused Carlos, who came out with an interview saying he doesn't even know about this case?
Well, in my older days, I'm trying to be less sensitive, but earlier, first thing I would jump to is the fact that it's not a real diverse neighborhood. I know people who live in that neighborhood. They even sent me pictures from their balcony last night of Nancy's house, from their house, and because they knew I was on court TV, so they sent me some videos showing me the area. And the one person they stopped is a person of color, and so we seen that in Boston when we had an issue there. But when I started listening more, if he was at the house, if his phone was by the house, I think it's good police work to at least follow up. The problem that I have is that he said he was arrested and then released. So I think to get to the part where you arrest somebody, you have to have a lot more than just a suspicion. It has to be probable cause, but I don't see what the probable cause was for the arrest. I see it for the questioning. That's not what's happening. So I think there's a lot to be discerned here. So I don't think it was a problem speaking to the media. I think I'm glad he did to shed some light on the fact that that he was interrogated, that he was arrested according to him, and that he was released. We need to know this stuff. But I think there's a lot more to come still.
Bob, you're disagreeing with something. Is that about the fact that he was arrested versus detained?
Yeah, I mean, we can. That's a beautiful question. We can go through the subtleties of this, and we can sit here on TV and opine about what law enforcement is doing. But I'm going to tell you as a person who actually did it. At this point in time, with an 84-year-old infirmed, ill person, if I have to, I'm not saying I would break the constitutional rights of a person, but if I had to really, really stretch them to save a life, that's what's going to happen. And that's exactly what happened here.
Now, Bob, a follow-up to that, do you think having persons of interest who are released and there's someone out there, would that hinder or would that be a problem for a future prosecution? Is that something a criminal defense attorney would be bringing up?
No, actually, when I would do these investigations, I used to actually have kind of like a black ops team that would go after the theory of our case when we had a person of interest, when we had a suspect, when we developed probable cause. I basically put them together and said, now I want you to find every other lead, run it down, dot the I's, cross the T's, exactly to blunt a defense argument down the road that we jump to a conclusion, which, by the way, happens. You had confirmation bias and you disregarded crucial evidence as to other suspects. So this actually shows they're doing a thorough, fulsome investigation, running the leads down. Again, their primary concern is getting her back. If the secondarily to get a prosecution and get a conviction, this helps them that they're doing a thorough job.
Let's watch back to the last press conference. Darnell, I'm going to get to your comment in just a minute. We want to listen to what the FBI said the last time they spoke publicly to everyone about what they were doing and what their hopes were for this investigation.
To anyone that may be involved, do the right thing. This is an 84-year-old grandma. This is an 84-year-old grandma that needs vital medication for her well-being. You still have the time to do the right thing before this becomes a worse, much worse scenario for you. Please return Nancy home.
Darnell, please finish your thought. I saw you had one, but also speak to, does this signal what we've been worried about, that they really don't have a person of interest? They're not holding it back. They don't actually have a suspect that they have in mind or a prime suspect. This was their person of interest, and now he has been cleared for the time being.
Yeah, I agree. So first of all, I just want to comment to my fellow guest. So I understand doing the most you can, but it has to be a real balance between our constitutional rights and stretching, as he put it. When you stretch something as opposed to breaking it, it still has the same effect at the end. So I didn't mind them questioning this gentleman, like I said, but when it came to the part of what he said, he was arrested and then released. I don't know if they had enough to arrest them and then release them. So if they're doing that, then they're playing guessing games. In terms of the last part of your question, if the FBI is still giving such a passionate plea for her return, it sounds like they're just doing the same thing that the family is doing, which is saying, if you know something, let me know. We would hope that the FBI and law enforcement will be doing more than just pleading, would be following up something more direct and more concrete at this time. We all seen the show, The First 48. After that, things go downhill. It's not that strong anymore. So I would be really worried if law enforcement is still just pleading passionately as opposed to following some leads after 48 hours.
And we've been seeing, Bob, this uptick in activity just within the last 48 hours that we didn't see before in terms of the media going to Annie Guthrie, the other daughter's home, and going back to Nancy Guthrie's home. What's your take on what that means about this investigation and whether they're going to be facing a lot of scrutiny after this is all over, regardless of the outcome?
Julie, you know from the first day we talked about this case that I was apoplectic, and I was actually pushed back on by people that they released this crime scene. This worries me from a profound level of competencies. This crime scene should not be shut down. By the way, this is like the third or fourth time I had to go back in. Until there is an arrest and maybe even a conviction, you never know what additional evidence you may need to go back there and evaluate, or something that seemed insignificant that becomes significant. Why am I harping on this? It just says to me, how skilled are these people in what it is that they're doing? Now, that said, they have exponentially increased the probability of solving this case with this videotape. An incredible forensic task that was done here, because it is going to significantly start gearing and dictating many things when we have our experts that are doing facial recognition, and whether it's a male or a female or young or older. I was watching how the person bent down. Is this a person who's not using their knees, but they're using their waist? It tells you the age of the individual. You look at the footprints. You see the footprints in relation to the tile. So now you start to get an idea of the characteristics of this individual, and moreover, how they move, the manner in which they move. Somebody who knows, we all know we have a loved one who could be completely covered up. Their back could be turned to us, but by the way they're moving, we know exactly who it is in a crowd of people. So somebody out there knows who this individual is. This is a major, significant turn in the case. But lastly, last point I will tell you, they're pleading. Look, it's about an approach. I think they're giving clues is good. Giving this information to the public is good. But basically saying we don't have any more than that, I don't think is helpful. Telling the community we need your help, that's how they're going to solve this case. They're going to get this person. Last point I got to make. In all the years I've done this, there's just something super creepy about this particular kidnapping. Something super weird that makes me think that money may not be the only motive involved here.
Well, we're going to talk about that evidence. Bob and Darnell, stand by. I'm glad you mentioned those videos, Bob, because we're going to be breaking that down next. We have to get to our break. But our focus remains on this investigation into missing Nancy Guthrie. And if and when this turns into a prosecution over her disappearance, we're looking at what the evidence is in the case that we have so far.
The Court TV podcast will return.
Welcome welcome back. We are keeping it on the topic of the search for Nancy Guthrie there in Tucson, Arizona. And we want to look at the best evidence that we've seen so far in this case. It's still in the investigation case. It is not a prosecution. No charges have been filed. No suspect is in custody. But we're looking at what we have so far and how might it be used in a future prosecution, beginning with this compelling video, probably the biggest break that we've seen in this case in the last 11 days. The FBI released surveillance videos of a masked person wearing a handgun holster outside of Nancy Guthrie's front door. This is the night she vanished from her Arizona home. And there are multiple views of this. You see there, it seems like a plant of some sort in front of the camera. And as we watch these all together, let's bring back in our power panel. We have Darnell Crossland and Bob Bianchi with us. Darnell, I want to start with you. Bob went through how he feels about what we're seeing and what it means. Tell me your reaction to seeing all of this video released that for 11 days the public didn't have, which probably would have been important.
Well, that's what comes to mind. I mean, for the last couple of days, Court TV has done a great job of covering this. And we all saw and questioned why this was just like maybe a missing person investigation. Then we said, well, she was too old just to wander off. So the FBI and law enforcement kept us in suspense. We didn't even know they had like what appears to be maybe a Ring or Nest door camera. So there's some reason why in this investigation, the public has been kept in the dark. So I think because of that, I can't sit here and think that this is all they have. They probably have a lot more, and maybe it's going to do a slow crawl, and then we'll get some real answers like in the snap of a finger, because they know more than we think based on the fact that they let this evidence out now.
That is true. Bob, I'm going to double click on something that Darnell said, because they initially told us we have the Ring, but there was no subscription. It was recorded over. I mean, it was a very specific. It wasn't a no comment. It was that we tried to get video images and they just didn't exist. I know you don't want to criticize the investigation and armchair quarterback it, but what does that tell you about how this investigation is going? I mean, these videos are very important.
Yeah, no, listen, I don't want to say it the wrong way. When I critiqued law enforcement, it was that the information that they gave out was we don't have anything. And if you may remember, Julie, we talked about this last week. I was like, if anything, you don't tell them you don't have anything, because then you're taking the pressure off. You want to create an unforced error by letting them think that law enforcement's on top of them. So this is not a piece of information that I would have let out if I were them. Moreover, apparently they hadn't done a sufficient enough investigation to realize that while the camera was deactivated, which may very well be true, there is unallocated space that apparently it was recording, and they went through a bunch of investigative hoops, and they probably brought in Secret Service and other individuals, marshals perhaps, who are very good at tracking, who said, wait a second, there could be this information in the unallocated space on various servers. So again, the amateur hour-ishness of this was that they probably didn't even know that these investigative tools existed. Somebody came in, said, yes, they do. They figured it out, and then they released it. So, yeah, it's something that law enforcement should know. This is why you don't do press conferences. I know how hard it is. Like I said to you last week, we would have to give something to the media to, quote-unquote, no disrespect, I'm in the media now, to feed the beast. But we really didn't want to give any investigative information. To Darnell's point, if I have some things in pocket, if you will, over here, and I don't tell the public, if I bring the suspect in or witnesses in, and I did not release that to the public, and they give me information that only the criminal could have known or people that were involved, they can't say they learned it from the media. So there's a lot here. But the bottom line is, to your point that you raised earlier, it would have been really important to have gotten this as soon as they could have. And I'm not saying they didn't get it quick enough, but the sooner the better, because as Darnell said before, the more time goes on, the worse the outcomes are.
Darnell, any opinion as we watch this video? We've all watched it. It's chilling. I mean, we knew that this was an abduction, but to see a masked person coming up to this door of this elderly mother, grandmother, any opinion about what they're doing with the plants and walking back and forth and even coming up to the camera? We know police have confirmed it was disconnected around 1:47 a.m.
Yeah, so when you look at all these cases, and we've covered a lot of them, you know, guy breaks into who's a professor, breaks into some young girl's house and kills them. And it runs the gamut. When you see these, you think mental health, you think whether it was financial, you start to go through the analysis. And, as Bob said earlier, this might be more than financial because this guy, I can't say he's old or young, but he looks like a young guy to me. The backpack, you can see his eyes through the head covering. And so I don't think she could have offended him. I don't think it couldn't be a dating situation because he looks, much younger than obviously the victim is. But so it leaves a lot more questions than answers. But I do think that he knew the person. He knew whose house that was and why he was there. We still don't know. We're not going to take money off the table because that's always something you're going to consider. But if it was a ransom, this is done very, very badly. And he's probably watched one too many ransom movies. But it's not being executed properly if that's what it is. But I do think he knew exactly whose house that was.
Well, let's talk about the money because that's our evidence number 2. The ransom notes identify this Bitcoin account set up to accept cryptocurrency for Nancy's return. And Savannah Guthrie said it in one of her online posts that they were, quote, willing to pay. So my question, Bob, is how traceable are these Bitcoin accounts? Is that going to be good evidence in a future prosecution of this case?
Well, I honestly have never dealt with a Bitcoin scenario, but my experience and having been on the inside of investigations and seeing the tools that law enforcement had that none of us regular folks get the opportunity to even know about because they don't even want to release the information for court. In fact, there were times that we would not prosecute a case because we didn't want to reveal our sources and methods. So that's a long-winded way to say I find it hard to believe that there wouldn't be some way to track down in an electronic fashion this Bitcoin account. I'm sure it's very difficult. And in the end, if they catch the person, I mean, somewhere down the line, they've got to use some computer or some device to access it. And that gives law enforcement an entry point there. One last point that I bring out investigatively, like right from the beginning, if I were at the crime scene and I were watching all this, I want to know whether there's any other elderly people that have been abducted or in the middle of the night situations like this happen, and whether we're dealing with a serial nature individual with this particular thing. And lastly, now everyone and their brother wants to call in and say, give me the ransom and here's my Bitcoin account, which is frustrating law enforcement's attempts to recover this woman, and they should be fully prosecuted for interference and hindering the apprehension of the individual involved in this.
Well, we know at least one person has been prosecuted, is being prosecuted. Go ahead, Darnell.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, to Bob's point. So we got to remember that we use terms very loosely, like refrigerator. That's just a brand. So Bitcoin is just one currency of the cryptocurrency. So I think what I've been hearing is that while there's a lot of cryptocurrency out there, some of them are really hard to trace. But Bitcoin is like your JP Morgan bank account. It's like a little easier to trace. So what I'm hearing is that if in fact Bitcoin is information is provided, they'll find it quicker, not access it. So there's a difference between accessing cryptocurrency because that's very complicated. But to be able to trace where it comes from and who it belongs to, if it's a Bitcoin, then it's going to be easier than if it was some other cryptocurrency that's a little bit more hidden.
Oh, that's fascinating. I want to move to our third evidence piece. Just from what we know police have got to have more than they're releasing to the public, but they have released this. And that's the confirmation that these blood drops found at Nancy's front door. Authorities said they were tested and it was confirmed to be connected to the victim. Take a listen.
And we're at that phase now where sometimes we're waiting, right? We're waiting for analysis. We're waiting for lab reports. But even then, when they come back quickly, for example, some DNA, we rushed what we thought was the best target for DNA. We did a rush through and got some of that back. The results were minimal. I think you all know the blood on the porch. That was one we did. It came back to Nancy. That's what we know. But there's still more items that have been submitted. We just haven't got them back yet.
So this was confirmed after it was actually noticed there on the porch that this blood was there by reporters. And after the crime scene was released, Bob, you mentioned that part of it. Darnell, let me get your take on it first. This DNA evidence outside, do you think there's more inside than they are telling us?
Yeah, so from what the media has been sharing is that they have been coming out of that home with a lot more things. They've been coming out of one of the family members' homes with a lot more things. So they're really being tight-lipped about this. And typically, when you have blood like that, it's either some kind of defensive wound, and therefore maybe a mixture of blood, not just from her. And so I was very concerned and interested in finding out whether, in fact, there was a mixture, at least of an unknown, and that they can compare. But they're only saying that came from her. Why is she bleeding? We don't know. If she's bleeding, maybe it was a fight. And normally if there's a fight, there'll be a mixture, again, from the person who's the combatant. But I think they're really being tight-lipped. And lastly, I would say, Mr. Nanos, we watch all these movies where the local guys are like, FBI is not going to come in here and show us out or take over. I hear in his voice, and, God bless him, but it has to be, as Bob said, one voice, because, he's trying to say his thing, and then as opposed to saying, we've turned it over to the FBI and we're working with them. They both seem to be sharing the spotlight and trying to, put the public at ease that they're working. But it's really not about who's working harder. It's about who's working smarter and are they working together.
Working together and bringing Nancy home. We do have to leave it there. Thanks to our panelists for weighing in on this one that is on so many people's minds and hearts. When we come back, though, we are going to go beyond the gavel, breaking down the biggest true crime cases. And this week, a trial is set to begin for a father accused of buying the gun allegedly used in a school shooting by his son. But his trial is going first. We'll talk about it next.
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
Welcome back. A jury has been seated, and the father of an accused school shooter is set to stand trial next week for his alleged role in a shooting that killed 4 people at a Georgia high school. Colin Gray has pleaded not guilty to 29 charges, including 2 counts of second-degree murder and 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter. All of this in connection with a September 4th mass shooting that happened at Appalachia High School. His son, Colt, is charged with carrying out this massacre. And before we bring in our panel, here's a look at this case.
The smart board said lockdown, and everybody ran into the corner. And the next thing you know, I just start hearing gunshots like crazy.
September 4th, 2024 started as a routine morning at Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia, about 45 minutes outside of Atlanta. It would then turn deadly when police say a 14-year-old freshman, Colt Gray, opened fire, killing 4 and injuring 9 others.
It was 10 shots, about a 3-second or 4-second pause, and then 7 more.
According to investigators, Gray carried an AR-15 style rifle onto a school bus that morning, the barrel sticking out of his backpack wrapped in poster board. They say he left his second period class and started shooting, first inside a classroom and then down a hallway. 4 people would lose their lives that day, 14-year-old students, Mason Schermerhorn and Christian Angelou, 53-year-old math teacher, Christina Arimi, and 39-year-old football coach, Richard "Ricky" Aspinwall.
In essence, you are charged with 4 counts of felony murder, as outlined in the state warrants that have been issued against you.
Colt Gray has been indicted on 55 felony counts, including 25 counts of aggravated assault. The teen has pled not guilty. He is not the only one facing charges in this tragedy.
How old are you, Mr. Gray?
54. Colt's father, Colin Gray, faces charges of second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. Prosecutors say Colin admitted to buying the rifle that his son used in the mass shooting and did so knowing that the teen was a danger to himself and others. He's pled not guilty to the charges.
So did Dad kind of explain everything to you? He said something about shooting up a school. Did you say something about school shooting? Never. I just told him, I don't know what. Maybe they misheard somebody else.
Deputies interviewed the Grays about a year before the shooting, based on FBI tips about alleged threats posted on the online platform Discord. In that interview, Colin said his son had been struggling with bullies, a new school, and his parents' divorce. He also said that Colt was very familiar with guns and hunting, saying he knew the seriousness of weapons.
I don't know anything about him saying like that, and I'm going to be mad as hell if he did. And then all the guns will go away, and they won't be accessible.
Investigators determined at the time there was no probable cause to take further action, citing inconclusive evidence. The morning of the shooting, Colt's mother, Marcy Gray, said she called the school warning of an extreme emergency after receiving a text from her son reading, "I'm sorry." Here's what she told ABC News.
Between my gut feelings, the text messages, and now this email, y'all need to go, like, run.
If convicted of murder, Colt Gray faces a life sentence. He is not eligible for the death penalty due to his age. His father, Colin, has been granted a change of venue in his case. If he's found guilty of murder, he could face up to 180 years in prison.
And again, a jury was seated today in Colin Gray's trial. Those opening statements are set to begin on Monday. Let's bring back in our guest. We have with us Bob Bianchi, and we're working on the technical difficulties with Darnell. But Bob, good to have you. My first big question is why the father's trial is going first. If the son is the one who's accused of this shooting, if the son is somehow acquitted in his trial, why are we going first with the alleged accomplice, really?
Look, these prosecutorial decisions as to who to do first are complex. They're very nuanced. You got to be in the file. But a lot of times, like to me, sometimes you decide to go first with somebody so that if they are convicted and they lose at that point in time, if it goes through the process, their right to remain silent and could potentially be called as a witness later on in the prosecution, potentially, of the son. That may be an issue. I don't think that that's necessarily going to be the way they're going to do, because they're not going to wait that length of time in the appeals process, so on and so forth. So I think that they felt that this was the case to go with first, get this out of the way, kind of spin their wheels. I've done this before where I want to kind of test run my case a little bit with the co-defendant and then go full board after all the evidence is introduced and go after the son. But the last point I will say to this, that could have a downside when you're trying out and spinning the wheels of your case, because the son's attorneys are getting an insight into how you're going to prosecute him. So, I don't know. They made the decision to go with him first.
Yeah, in the son's case, we've got this pending mental health evaluation that could become very important in the father's case. Let's bring back in Darnell Crossland. Darnell, what is your opinion of the father's case going first in this accused school shooter? That is the reason that we even have the father on trial.
Well, it's funny because we've seen a couple of these school shootings, and as a prosecutor, Bob could attest to this. Sometimes they go with the case that they feel is the strongest, and if the other party sees what's happening, then they can strike a deal. So they don't have to try all the cases. Sometimes they flip that. They might go with the case that's the weakest, and the person who's holding out may decide to come forward with a deal. So it all depends on the strategy of the prosecutor.
Bob, a question about being a prosecutor on a case like this. What is your opinion of parent responsibility when it comes to these school shootings? This is new territory, I would say, that in the last few years, we've seen these cases against parents, against security guards, against principals. Your opinion on whether that is an appropriate use of the prosecution's office?
Great question. So prosecutors are given a wide latitude of discretion, and the thought process behind that is that the prosecutor should be able to evaluate each case on a case-by-case basis, and based upon what we call aggravating and mitigating factors, make a decision as to whether they're going to prosecute or not prosecute. Me personally, typically speaking, and every prosecutor has a different philosophy and a different temperature. We're all human beings. I did not like going after third parties who were not responsible for the activities because of their negligence, and especially after parents for acts that their children did. However, in a case like this, where we're dealing with guns and we're dealing with a prolific gun and mass shooting problem, the deterrence aspect of what I do as a prosecutor now ratchets up, going after people that are allowing kids with mental health problems access. Kid, in that video that you just showed, he had a pre-existing knowledge that the kid was a problem, that he was being bullied, that he had mental health disorders, and he puts armament into the hands of a teenager who's young and immature to begin with is the definition of, at a minimum, significant recklessness. And therefore, as a prosecutor, I would change my perspective and I would say, I need to make a point. He is the one that, in my mind, to be honest with you, based on his son's problems, is the primary person responsible. To Darnell's point, that may be the reason why they're going after the father first.
Darnell, from the defense side, do you agree?
Yes, definitely. I would have to agree with this because, again, we've seen all these matters, cases in Florida and around the country, and it's very hard to have a parent who's working hard, doing their best, 2 or 3 jobs sometimes. They might have a firearm at home. They did their best to lock it up, and the kid gets in there and causes a problem, to hold that person liable. Now, they're going to put that person in jail. They have to get lawyers, etc. But if the scenario is as egregious as this one, where it's just, but for, then this father has to be held liable because it seems he's so cavalier about the thing. He knows his son's issues. You could just body language. You look at his son, you look at him, he's probably maybe trying to be the cool dad, something, but you have to worry about the responsibilities that you owe to society as a whole. And when you don't accept that responsibility, then you put a deadly weapon into this child's hand, and you got to be responsible for that.
It's a hot button issue. It's going to be an interesting trial. Those opening statements start on Monday. You can watch them here on Court TV Live. We have got to get to a break, but coming up, we're getting the hot takes on the cold facts from our panel on today's biggest cases. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Court of Opinion.
This is the Court TV Podcast.
Welcome back. It's that time to get the hot takes on the cold facts from our panel of experts. First up, our story out of New Jersey. This trial that we've been covering, closing arguments resume tomorrow in the Mansion murders trial for Paul Canero. And the jury is going to get the case then. He is accused of murdering his brother and his brother's family before setting both of their homes on fire. He's facing life in prison if he's convicted at trial. Prosecutors allege Paul fatally shot Keith and Jennifer Canero and stabbed his niece and nephew to death on November 20th of 2018. Now, an investigation revealed that Paul and Keith, they were business partners, and before the murders, Keith accused his brother of stealing money from the business. What will the jury do with this case and these really long closing arguments? Let's bring back in our power panel, Darnell Crossland and Bob Bianchi. We give our panelists 25 seconds so we can get to all the stories and get to all of them. Bob, your take on what's going to happen with Paul Canero?
I'll give you my Jersey boy opinion. First of all, prosecutors did a phenomenal job investigating this case and putting on their case. If you're a lawyer out there, you want to learn how to try a case as a prosecutor, this is the case to watch. Textbook. Defense did a phenomenal job, too. It was a pleasure to watch. I think it's a guilty. The evidence was overwhelming. I will say there was an explosion in the courtroom with regard to defense tactics on discovery. If you're a lawyer, you need to listen to it. We're doing it in our office, breaking it down.
Darnell Crossland, the defense says he's a nice guy. He would never do this to his brother and his brother's family.
Well, he had access to the bank accounts, and he was supposed to be doing the right thing for the business. It appeared that he was dipping in the bank accounts too much. His brother had the right to question that. When you see such an egregious display of callousness, I think the jury is not going to be able to overcome that, no matter how they try to paint the picture. So he's going to be found guilty.
All right, let's move to our second story. This one out of Kentucky. Attorneys for jailed former Lecter County Sheriff Sean Mickey Steins. So we know this story. He has submitted a motion to exclude the death penalty from his trial. He is on trial or expected to go on trial for first-degree murder, accused of shooting and killing a district judge, Kevin Mullins. This happened after an argument in the county courthouse on September 19th of 2024. We saw this horrific video. His attorneys are requesting that the death penalty be excluded from Steins' case because they claim he has, quote, serious intellectual disabilities or a serious mental illness. Steins' representation requested a hearing to determine if his intellectual function or mental health status, what it is, before his murder trial. Darnell, let me start with you. What's your take on this big request?
Well, first of all, I'm very afraid to be in a county where the sheriff has serious mental health issues, because not only does he have a gun, but he's over many people with guns. In terms of what I've seen in that video, it's very different. The judge is sitting there smoking a cigarette indoors. they seem to have a weird relationship. But nonetheless, I think the death penalty will come off the table.
Bob, what do you think about whether it's coming off or whether maybe they try to get a plea?
Well, they're definitely going to want to get a plea. That's why the prosecutors aren't going to take it off the table, because they want to at least force a life sentence. I don't think it should be taken off the table. You can't go into a courthouse and shoot a sitting judge. It's about as bad as it gets. And by the way, irrespective of your mental health condition, that's not an excuse. You knew exactly what you were doing. There was very goal-oriented behavior. He not only fired multiple times, he started to walk out the door and just for good measure, turned back around and shot the guy again. It's going nowhere with a mental health offense.
That is going to be the worst evidence against him. Turning to our third story, Alec Murdaugh's attorneys pushing for a new trial in court today, but say they don't want to repeat the 6-long, quote, drama that played out in South Carolina's Low Country. Now, Alex Murdaugh has maintained his innocence after a jury found him guilty of murdering his wife, Maggie, and their younger son, Paul. This all happened at their home in 2021. He was sentenced to life, and in his appeal, his attorneys say that improper evidence was admitted at trial. They also say the court clerk was pressuring jurors to reach a guilty verdict. Bob Bianchi, your take on good old Alec Murdaugh.
I'm going to take a course that you're not going to be surprised at. As a prosecutor, this case bothers me. I think it should be reversed. The introduction of extraneous 404 evidence, as we call it, that had nothing to do with the guilt or innocence of this defendant, went too far to prejudice the jurors. Is a very specific rule that you're not supposed to be beating the person up and beating up their character. They went too far. As a prosecutor, I never went that far. And the jury tampering issue with the court clerk is extremely problematic. Irrespective of what your thoughts are on Murdaugh, he needs a new trial.
Darnell Crossland, that is a hot take. Do you agree?
Right up against the wall, Bob. So I'm going to save more time on my clock because I'm going to agree with Bob's first part, but I'm going to focus on what the headline says. Alec Murdaugh's attorneys seek a new trial, but don't want to do it again. What does that mean? They want to win the motion for the new trial, but then the prosecutors say, hey, we agree, we're too tired. Can we strike a better deal? So he just wants a better deal, not really a new trial.
All right, Bob Bianchi and Darnell Crossland, thank you so much for being on with us. That's our time. Thank you for connecting with us this hour for what is actually our last Court of Opinion show. So I want to take this time to give a special thanks to our fantastic team here at Court TV. They're behind the scenes. You don't see what they do, but you see what plays out on television because of all of their hard work. So we appreciate them. And we're appreciative of you, the viewers, who have been so supportive on social media, giving us comments of encouragement and also asking some really great questions that we've been able to bring to you here on Court of Opinion. I would say that if you have one takeaway from this format, it is that in an increasingly polarizing society, we all can work to find common ground with someone who thinks or believes differently from us. Strive to respect the other's opinion. I do believe that that can help our society become less polarizing. We can debate without hate.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to CourtTV.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.